Welcome to the Dry Fasting Club and the beautiful world of dry fasting. I'm Yannick Wolf, and I hope to be able to guide you on your dry fasting journey. The following information is not medical advice, so please treat it as strictly informational. The Dry Fasting Club was started with the goal of bringing dry fasting to everyone, bringing science and experimentation to something that has long been considered strictly spiritual. The Dry Fasting Club is a place where new and experienced fasters can get accessible information. Dry fasting is the most powerful form of fasting, but with great power comes great responsibility, and dry fasting safely should always be your number one goal. Paying for a subscription on the site helps out by giving you access to some controversial articles that are hidden from search engines and gets you a quick one-on-one chat with me to discuss all things dry fasting and maybe even more. I highly recommend joining the Dry Fasting Club Discord group, which is free, where you can meet other dry fasters from all walks of life and with different point of views. The one thing everyone can agree on, dry fasting is the best when done properly. Now let's get to today's discussion. Hi everyone. Today we're going to be talking about what I learned after 300 days of dry fasting. Things that I truly believe are critical and not well known, or are highly controversial and hotly debated. Before I begin this article, I have to start off by saying that the 300 days of dry fasting include over 100 days of actually dry fasting and over 200 days of refeeding, trying various different experimental variations. I've done a lot of fasts, tons of 3 days that I even didn't keep track of, 5 days, 7 days, some 9 days, and even an 11-day one. You may have found this topic or episode by searching something like who has dry fasted the longest or longest dry fast ever recorded. While I may not claim to have dry fasted the longest, over 100 days of dry fasting puts me pretty high up there. Not to mention the research behind it and the hundreds of hours of help I provide guiding other fasters. What I figured out is that you don't need to do really long dry fasts of more than 7 days if you can dial it in with precision. So healing usually doesn't occur after 1 or 2 fasts. That's important to remember. And you don't necessarily have to hit those crazy days. Some people call those psychotic 10 and up days of dry fasting. Yes, if you have the discipline and willpower to go longer, you can cut down some time because it does take a little bit more prep, more time to perform more shorter ones than one long one. I talk about this a little more in the next article that I'm writing, but it has to do with chaperone-mediated autophagy days being the ones that should really be counted. So I have a bit of a calculation there that I'll talk about later. But if you prefer to focus on the magic 5 days, there are ways to merge this into your daily life and not have to take months off of work or go on dry fasting retreats out of the country. So dry fasting can heal anything and everything. My last few months have been filled with real life commitments, helping others, fighting back from a COVID reinfection, scary, and lots of experimentation. Side note, from the most current research, I do believe that one of the main causes of long COVID stems from the bone marrow being infected because of certain deficiencies caused by extreme stress, physical or mental, during an acute infection. So it happens to a small subset of the population, and somehow it gets into that bone marrow and causes infected IgG replication. So your immune system gets hijacked. So it's definitely scary. There are no medications that are going to treat your infected bone marrow currently, unless you look into some crazy, dangerous surgeries like bone marrow replacement. Unless it's also for the elite. So another option is full stem cell therapy. So they can repopulate bone marrow stem cells harvested from compatible embryonic stem cells. The only thing that you have to hope is for your, So other than all of this, we have dry fasting. So your hope lies in your body's own autophagy. And I have a note here. Autophagy is the main cellular stress response system for the elimination of damaged organelles and proteins. and it plays a critical role in the differentiation, apoptosis, and survival of bone cells, including bone marrow stem cells, osteoblasts, osteoclasts, and osteocytes. So that just shows us that autophagy can work on that, and then you do need your stem cells to build back what autophagy has destroyed. Back to dry fasting healing. Sure, some exceptions apply to every rule, but I'll be damned if it doesn't work on nearly everything. The human body is so complex, the more you learn about it, the more you realize how little we know. Once you start trying to understand metabolic pathways like the Krebs cycle, you learn that many of these relationships have been defined and we understand certain mechanisms, but it's not all fully understood. I mean, just comprehending the fact that energy and light can play a vital role in shaping so many metabolic processes shows us that our studies for the past 100 years have not even had a true control group. We're only now starting to realize that on a quantum level, UV light impacts almost everything. This could mean everything we think we know is off to varying degrees. Anyways, taking all of this into consideration, I'm sure we can agree that the body is very complicated and the thousands of different diseases, pathologies, although similar, are usually unique to the person. Like a disastrous yet beautiful mosaic of symptoms, causes, and inflammation. When someone gets very sick with an autoimmune disease, for example, often the symptoms are treated, but the underlying condition worsens or is kept at bay with an ever-increasing assortment of medication. The doctor starts giving medicine A for symptom A, which causes symptom B, so now we take a medicine for symptom B, which causes a symptom C, and so on and so forth. What if our body had a house cleaning switch, something that literally targets everything from organs to cells to microtubules to ribosomes to your mitochondria? Sure, I can't do it all in a couple of days, but consistent house cleaning will eventually get the job done. That goes to say with a good diet in between and making sure you're living a healthy, active lifestyle. Welcome to fasting. Now, intermittent fasting is all the rage. Water fasting is growing in popularity, but dry fasting is still pretty taboo. Fasting is already understood that it's a house cleaner of sorts. But what if I told you that once you tip the scales into disease, intermittent fasting is usually not powerful enough to do the right amount of house cleaning and get you out of that disease? You're going to require serious autophagy, and there's multiple different levels of autophagy and different types of autophagy. Yes, with water fasting, you can get great results. And there's a reason there are so many testimonials out there of people getting cancer and then water fasting for, let's say, 30 plus days. So when times get desperate, people get to something I've coined as desperation fasting. Very unfortunate how often I see this. Of course, preventative fasting is the cure for a healthy life with the least amount of stress. But let's face it, most people start their fasting journey because of a health issue. Knowing this, especially if you, the one who's listening, if you're one of them, it's critical to understand that you're coming from a disadvantaged position. You will not have an easier time than your friend who is not as ill as you. So healthy people will always have an easier time with fasting, and you need to understand that as you undergo this process. Let's talk a little bit about some different types of autophagy before we get into the main points. I'll just go over it quickly. We have macroautophagy. That's basically what the body is supposed to do on a regular basis. When you sleep, you go to a little bit of a fast and your body does some house cleaning. There's microautophagy, which is your lysosomes directly engulfing cytoplasmic components. So that happens less at night and usually gets triggered through a ketogenic diet, low carb diet, nutrient deprivation, some starvation. But that does still occur, let's say on a nightly basis or after exercise. There's chaperone-mediated autophagy. So this is the golden autophagy that I like to talk about. I say, according to research, this usually occurs around day 2.5 to day 3 of a dry fast, and on a water fast around day 7. So you have to really go deep for chaperone-mediated autophagy. It's an autophagy that was pretty recently discovered. Forget who it was, but it was a woman at a fasting researcher at a university. And this is a very important one. This is basically like microautophagy on steroids. You actually have a protein that goes into the cell and searches for bad components, pulls them out and drops them directly into the lysosome. So instead of the lysosomes just kind of meandering very slowly through your cells, this is like autophagy on steroids. You have mitophagy, which is mitochondrial autophagy, so it removes damaged mitochondria, very important. And then there's autophagies like pexophagy, which is peroxisome degradation, and ribophagy, which is another very new autophagy discovered that our ribosomes actually can be degraded. And there's no technology right now that goes deep into the ribosomes and mitochondria and maybe even the microtubules. So we have no ways to actually target these other than on such a nanomicroscopic level, which occurs with extended fasting. Some of these are only triggered deep into a fast. With a dry fast, you activate them around day 3. Mitophagy is something we all need because mitochondrial health can be argued as the key to overall health. It's mainly stimulated by nutrient deprivation, but also recently discovered to be stimulated by hypoxia. So hypoxia is special to mitophagy. So a low oxygen environment. This is the opposite of hyperbaric oxygen therapy. And if you've been in the autoimmune disease world and trying to cure yourself over the last few years, you've probably heard about hyperbaric oxygen therapy. A lot of people swear by it. That's the mechanism where you sit in a pod and they change the pressure and they pump high levels of pure oxygen to go deep into your cells. Of course, constant hypoxic environments, so opposite of hyperbaric, low oxygen environments, are terrible for our cells. But the stressor involved with dry fasting is like controlled stress, which can be very beneficial. During certain autoimmune conditions, especially long COVID, we know that mitochondrial dysfunction occurs. Not only that, some of the mitochondria are seen to fuse together into some sort of non-functioning chimera mitochondria. Think of it like a 3-headed fused mitochondria. So let's really look into this mitophagy, because in these sort of situations, we really need it. Before we can get more mitochondria, we must destroy the bad ones, or else that process will be stalled. Water fasting is very powerful in and of itself. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to always work for some of the more dastardly illnesses. Do you know why? Water fasting is not the most powerful form of fasting. Dry fasting is. We talk about letting the digestive system rest, but we continue to fill it with exogenous water that needs to be cleaned and filtered through our body. The exogenous water is the one we're drinking, outside water. Dry fasting literally lets the digestive system stop functioning and go to sleep. That's also why refeeding, even with just water, because even water is considered refeeding in this case, has slightly unique components when it comes to dry fasting, as well as it needs to be taken very seriously. A bad refeed can actually unravel a lot of the benefits you are looking to get. So the safest approach to refeeding is following protocols that others have been doing for a while. And once you understand the basics in your body, you can begin to tweak them a little bit. Villenov's protocols are the safest in my opinion, even though he slightly tweaks them from time to time. If you notice, the Scorch protocol builds off of Villenov's protocol with a lot of experimentation, but the skeleton, the bare bones, remain. A common comparison between dry fasting and water fasting is that the dry fasting is 3 times more powerful. That's just a simplified explanation. It goes much deeper and more nuanced than that. It has to do with deeper ketosis and faster lysosome activity. Lysosomes are the key behind most of the benefits when it comes to fasting, and they're activated by an acidic environment. I don't believe it's healthy to live in this state for too long. Here's looking at the carnivore diet and zero carb diets, but an acidic environment is what happens when you fast for a longer time, because once you start burning fat, you release fatty acids that get converted to ketones. This triggers things like chaperone-mediated autophagy, which probably requires an extreme acidic environment. So as early as day 3 on a dry fast, but only on day 7 of a water fast. If you notice, those are the moments that trigger the acidotic crisis. You cannot forget that dry fasting also creates a thick blood type of environment called a hypertonic environment. So it creates hypertonic stress. Hypertonic stress, like all other hormetic stresses, helps your body bounce back much stronger. Think of it like this: sauna, heat stress; ice bath, cold stress; working out and running, physical stress; water fasting, food stress; dry fasting, water and food stress. All right. Enough of that lengthy introduction. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Here we're going to start going to some of the main points that when I sat down and I thought about all of these dry fasts and everything I've learned, there's thousands of things, nuances, little things that I've learned over the years. But just like the most powerful things that came to me when I was thinking about this article, I listed. There's more here. I could expand on the article, but I'm really going to have to focus because these articles can really get out of hand. So to start us off, I want to say, do not underestimate cold plunges during a long dry fast. I know that it's kind of crazy, and I know in earlier episodes, I really hyped up hard dry fasting where you have zero contact with water. And I still believe in that, and it's still pretty much a fact that if you completely avoid water, you can maximize the healing benefit. But the problem is, what is that? Is that a 1 or 2% extra benefit? Is it worth all that extra effort? I don't know, but in my situation and from my experimentation, cold plunges are powerful. So let me talk about it. Are cold plunges required? No. Are they recommended? Yes. Cold plunges are intense. And for me, it's a hate-love relationship. You hate thinking about it, you hate doing it, but you love the feeling afterward. It's important to remember that as you continue doing them, it gets easier and easier. And before you know it, you're a cold freak that tries to persuade their friends to cold plunge. I'll have maybe a post about cold plunges and dry fasting that goes into a lot more detail about how to do it, different options, how to prep, how to do it in stages, what types are better for certain conditions or better for certain people, and physiological benefits and how they correlate with all the fasting milestones. But that's for the future. Overall, you'll notice that on the first 2 days of a dry fast, it's very common to be cold or slightly cold or very cold, similar to water fasting, except for water fasting, that condition extends for a lot more days. Actually, most likely throughout the whole water fast, to be honest. This is because you still have high levels of water in your system as it is transitioning into ketosis. You find yourself in a sort of energy limbo. That's why the first 2 days are the hardest of a dry fast. And ignoring going to like day 7 and up, I'm saying in that first 7 days, I think the first 2 are really tough. Once you hit day 3, your energy and mood improve. Think of 3 as like line that you cross, and it's just things just get so much better. This is also when you start feeling more warm on a dry fast. This is in relation to fat burn being really high, which creates excess energy felt as heat. This is also because your blood starts to thicken, which holds in more heat as well. Filanov says things like your cells turn into mini furnaces, which could be related to the increased lysosome activity disintegrating many cellular debris and pathogens in your cells and more. Because of this, you'll want to avoid cold showers and cold plunges on the first 2 days. Trust me, it doesn't feel good and it's pretty unnecessary unless you just love it and need it. On the third day and up, once you start feeling more comfortable, warm, and thirsty, you know it's about time to consider the cold water therapy. Look to do it when you need a boost of rejuvenating energy or motivation to continue. The colder the experience, the more dopamine will be created, which will help you keep going. Cold water therapy is one of the only natural methods to get a sustained multiple-hour dopamine increase. Not only that, but the cold forces blood back into the core and then pushes back blood filled with lysosomes, nutrients, and vitamins, thereby speeding up healing and well-being. It's also very important not to use cold water on the first few days of a refeed. That's when you need to stay warm as your body revs up and prepares for the rebuilding phase. It also has to do with the immune system. Just remember to not take cold showers or put yourself into cold environments on the first few days of the refeed. A softer version for those of us who need some time to build up to cold showers is cold water face immersion. Immerse your forehead, eyes, and at least 2/3 of both cheeks in cold water. This will stimulate your vagus nerve. Keep it in as long as possible. Side note, when doing cold therapy, you ideally want to get to the point that you get goosebumps while you are still in the water. For ice water, you only need it to be 30 to 90 seconds, and as the temperature goes up, so does the time you need to sit in it. So if you have just slightly cold water, you need to sit in it for a long time. Studies showed slightly similar benefits sitting in moderately cold water for much, much longer, but ain't nobody got time for that. The next point, refeeding is more important than the dry fast. Of course, you need to fast. In fact, it's super important to pass the first acidotic crisis and push as long as you can afterwards, safely, to get chaperone-mediated autophagy to activate and heal you. That being said, the refeed will make or break you, as that's the time your immune system rebuilds, your mitochondria rebuild, and stem cells flood your body. In my opinion, fruitarian is not the ideal dry fasting diet, and I'm dedicated to giving you the answers even if you don't like them. One of the most important ones are eggs and more eggs. To see a near ideal diet that you can make some variations to, read my monster detailed post about refeeding. There's two of them. So there's the Scorch protocol, which is the most important one, and I work on it constantly. There's still a lot to do, and it basically has day zero updates. So I try to keep it as up to date as possible. And there's another article called How to Refeed After a Dry Fast, the Filanov Protocol Variation. That's a really important one. It's an article that shows pictures of the food, talks about preparing it, and discusses logical conclusions of different types of food when making decisions. Look for the newest refeed guide that will point you to the correct places, depending on what you are looking for. For example, if you're looking to heal an autoimmune issue like long COVID, you need to approach refeeding on a low sugar diet while still maintaining all the important building blocks post-fast. That talks a little bit about glucose. If you're looking to just be an overall healthy and coming from a decently healthy position, you need to adopt a metabolically flexible refeed. It's knowing when to support stem cell growth with good sources of glucose, protein, vitamins, and omega-3. Then it's knowing when to help kick in autophagy by eating minimal carbs. It's also about knowing different supplement hacks, exercise timings, and more. The best way to keep up to date with most of this is the Scorch protocol, as I keep trimming and improving it on a weekly basis. Another critical point, and something sort of more like a recent elevation. Anyways, carbs should not be skipped during the refeed. You can embrace zero carb or carnivore after a successful refeed. Carbs are important because they are the easiest to digest and provide building blocks for erythrocytes, which are red blood cells, kidneys, reproductive organs, and about 30% of your brain. Your glycogen stores will be attempting to refill because gluconeogenesis will be minimized. Think about this. Sure, you can maintain homeostasis with zero carbs through gluconeogenesis, but don't you dare dream that it will be enough to both maintain cellular composition turnaround, rebuild stem cells and glucose-dependent organs, and refill glycogen stores. Sorry, I'm serious. No to carnivore refeeds because of this situation. Sure, you can increase the amount of egg, but lay off the fats unless they come from kefir and eggs, which are the most digestible fat. Also, meat is tough on the system. I love meat and I believe it's one of the healthiest things for us in this pesticide-driven world, but trust me and trust the fasting doctors on the first steps of the refeed. Boy, oh boy, is there a ton of theorizing and theory crafting when it comes to this. Luckily, I have real-world experience running different tests and experiments, but this topic in and of itself should be explored more. Stripping away all of the complexities, it boils down to digestibility. Keep it simple, stupid. Eat digestible during the refeed. Not all carbs are created equal. Fibers are carbs too. Keep carnivore to the pre-fast prep zone and to the daily diet lifestyle. Personally, I prefer doing an animal-based type of diet on the day-to-day. And then I have a chart here for digestion time and different foods, but a very easy way to look at it from step to step is most digestible to hardest, watery fruits to cereals to vegetables to fish, chicken, turkey, to hard cheese, to nuts, to beef, to pork. You can replay that if you need to hear it again. But you follow this digestibility chart and it makes you understand why the refeed protocols look the way they look. Another key point is embrace not sleeping on a dry fast, but don't avoid it though. Sleep is one of the most important parts of healing and even autophagy. Did you know that autophagy in the brain mainly occurs during sleep? Think of it like house cleaning for your body. The brain is the customer-facing part of a store and the warehouse is the body. You can't clean while there are customers, so you can't clean the brain, the customer-facing part of the store, while you're awake. The warehouse, though, gets cleaned all throughout the day. That's the body. And that's why sleeping is so important for the brain. During the refeed, it's when a lot of healing occurs there. That's another reason I recommend magnesium glycinate during the refeed. And if you're having trouble falling asleep still, then the go-to is melatonin. A more natural way would be to use magnesium glycinate and chamomile tea to get yourself to sleep. However, during a dry fast, you may be unable to sleep much. Don't freak out. It's part of the process. You will eventually fall asleep, even if it is just for a few hours. This will be enough. Freaking out will only make it worse. If it's a big issue, then look into some tips I provide in the Scorch protocol, like sleep promoting activities, and even hacking some sublingual melatonin during the post-absorptive and pre-acidotic crisis phases. There are also patches called sleep patches. They contain things like melatonin, valerian root, hops, magnesium, and 5-HTP. This is considered heresy by some and experimental by others. The logic here is that we are bypassing the digestive system and going straight to the blood. The blood is thicker and undergoing autophagic and acidic processes, so this is a do it at your own risk type of scenario. I am still in the process of testing these along with one or two others. If you're interested in testing this, please reach out to me by the Discord group and let me know how it goes. Just some personal experience on my first tests. I did have a little bit of an allergic reaction to the sleeping patch when I tested it recently, but it could have been due to allergies and just general exhaustion. So I still have a lot to do there. Another point is day 1 to 3 is the hardest barrier to break. And for some reason, most people are not aware of this. You may notice that if you often intermittent fast, or even better, do one meal a day, the first day of a dry fast is super easy. However, for most people, the pain starts even on day 1, especially if you start it the night before. So you're already deeper into it on that first day when you wake up. The first 3 days are called the post-absorptive phase. Read more about it in an article called Fasting Mechanisms. You can expect a lot of physical struggle as your body transitions into burning fat from fuel while it depletes its stored glycogen. It is during these days that you are battling both a physical barrier, which is entering ketosis, and a mental barrier of not being able to eat, and that's a mix of boredom, ghrelin, and leptin hormones. Once you deplete most of your liver glycogen as well as muscle glycogen, you will enter into the acidotic crisis. The peak is reached and passed when you start to feel a lot better. It's at this point you can imagine your body breaking free from the cocoon and working completely differently. You can watch this transition and notice it if you monitor your urine pH and blood glucose during the fast. A slight jump in blood glucose and a pH of around 6 indicates you've entered it and should start to feel better soon. This can vary a little bit based on baselines, and that's why if I talk with anybody and encourage them to take measurements, I use their pre-fast measurements as a baseline to understand what normal numbers should look like during the fast. Breaking the fast, though, depends on the person and the fasting flexibility your body has developed. Some call this the fasting muscle. Depending on if you fasted before, you may enter it as soon as 60 hours in. For others, it may take as much as 80 hours. I've noticed that you can hack this even quicker by starting with a ketogenic diet and even faster with a zero-carb diet. This is discussed more in the Scorch protocol and leads me to the next point. Preparation can make or break your attempt. As a follow-up to the previous point, preparation is the most powerful way to ease your transition past the first days of the dry fast. It's also important when considering extended fasts and not having heavy foods sitting around in your digestive system. Eating meat the day before and starting an extended dry fast is a recipe for a disaster. But it's not as bad as refeeding on the first day with meat, because your bile's still working on that first and second day of a dry fast. The food you eat before the dry fast is important. You are balancing zero carb with extremely hydrating and alkaline foods. Some people prefer to juice before a fast to do two things. Start a liquid diet to minimize the impact on the digestive system and to fill up on mineral reserves. I used to subscribe to the idea of filling up on minerals right before, but have since slightly veered away. Believe it or not, your fat cells hold vitamins and minerals and will keep you nutritionally complete during the fast, minus a few things like vitamin C. It's mainly dependent on how complete your fat stores are. If you are deficient before going into the fast, you will have a hard time, regardless of if you stock up on minerals before the fast and into your blood. There's a limited absorption rate of minerals in the body, and it's also dependent on lipogenesis, adipose tissue creation, fat creation. The point is that now, through experimentation, I believe that a carnivore or zero-carb diet is an optimal hack to speed up the power of the dry fast, meaning you get more out of it per hour than you would under a carb-filled diet pre-fast. Some things change here when you start going to 7 and up days, and it has to do with hydration levels and how carbs hold on to more liquid and make your cells more hydrated. It's a little bit complicated. I'm not going to get into it here. Carnivore, though, is hardcore. If you can handle a week of it, you will breeze through the dry fast. If you've been on carnivore for a really long time, you may have an easy time starting a dry fast, but you will have a hard time going extended. Carnivore is a tool. It should not be a way of life, in my opinion. If you think that fiber and carbs are not necessary for optimal health, you're way off. If you can't eat a piece of fruit or vegetable without relapsing or being sent to the ER with gut issues, stop pretending that you are truly healthy. Metabolic flexibility is the number one sign of health. Of course, you should not eat meat at least 48 hours before the start, so you can use the Scorch protocol concept of transitioning into more eggs and bone broth and finishing up on powdered bone broth, which has no fat. And that's explained in the protocol as well. Another important point is caffeine withdrawal is a dry fast killer. This is common sense, and I've been aware of it for a while, having added it to most protocols. However, I believe it's more than common sense. It's a requirement at this point, a requirement that not many people adhere to. After so many fasts, the difference between being nearly fully withdrawn from caffeine versus just lightly tapered off is astronomical. One of your biggest battles on top of the keto flu transition will be caffeine withdrawal. Disregard this at your own risk. It more than doubles your success with the dry fast. If you read the Scorch protocol, you will see strategies for a preparation period that help you go through caffeine withdrawal much easier. The gist behind my strategy involves transitioning to steeping something like yerba mate instead of brewing coffee. Lightly steeped yerba mate tea is still very tasty, has some caffeine, while lightly brewed coffee is disgusting. As you transition off of yerba mate, you can still take raw cacao in a form like cacao paste to keep up small amounts of caffeine and theobromine. Doing this makes sure that you are not tripling your agony during a dry fast, which for most people means that you will exit the fast early. So take this caffeine situation very, very seriously. Not to mention, caffeine is a stem cell inhibitor. No heavy exercise, no cardio, and no sauna is the next point. Hard labor and dry fasting don't mix. It's the dose that makes the poison. The body creates metabolic water. You can read more about it in my article, Metabolic Water and Fasting. So this metabolic water is what allows us to dry fast for periods of 7 to 11 days. And it honestly is one of the main reasons we can dry fast past 3 days. But that assumes you are maintaining a delicate balance by not overexerting yourself. There are reports of going longer, and some crazy people have done it, but it is a bit irresponsible. Some diseases are so pervasive that you'll do anything to get rid of them, including attempting to break dry fasting records to do things like dehydrate the parasites, bacteria, or viral persistence. To be safe, please be aware that exercising may put you into a big water deficit, one that metabolic water cannot supplement correctly, so it will not keep up. This can put you into a dangerous dehydration level and can cause negative effects in the long run. You don't need to do this to heal efficiently, and stop trying to speed up a dry fast by exercising and doing heavy work, heavy exercise, sauna, and cardio. Every time I've tried to min-max and experiment with sauna use during the dry fast, it has backfired. There's a time and place to mess around with it if you're doing short fasts. For example, the way boxers prepare for a weigh-in. But if you're looking to heal, ditch the idea of sweating and heat stress. The dry fast will make you hot all on its own. Once you enter the acidotic crisis and onwards, I know most people won't learn this mistake until they make it themselves. But if you're reading this and want to min-max your healing, you will avoid making this mistake, and with it, avoid a setback to your healing journey. So what I'm saying here is learn from others who have tried it. It will waste your time. It will make you feel worse. It will shorten your fast. And overall, just extend your whole long journey of healing. Another point is you will have ups and downs. This is a short point. You can be your own worst enemy when it comes to dry fasting. If you're not mentally prepared in advance for these fluctuating waves of energy, motivation, and depression, you will be at their mercy. The idea of "this too shall pass" needs to be ingrained in your head, and you need a strategy to get through the low points. If it means retreating into your sanctuary of playing a video game or going for a walk or meditating, so be it, but be prepared in advance. I've developed dozens of mechanisms to deal with it, but the more I dry fasted, the easier it was to spot the wave and just ride it. Just sit there and tell yourself that it will pass and you must go through this wave. Go number 2 during the first 3 days of refeeding. If you can't go to the bathroom after 3 days of refeeding, it means you may have impacted stool. So I've come across this now many times with other people, and that's why my small variation during the refeed protocol includes magnesium, since it has a laxative and calming effect. But sometimes you still can't go, and there's a chance that you have parasites, and an enema is highly recommended. You could have dead parasites, you could have impacted stool, and it's stuck. This is also one of the reasons ivermectin is listed as an intermediate step when preparing for a dry fast under the Scorch protocol. You need to learn about this extraordinary molecule and not be afraid of using it correctly. On top of it being a fascinating and powerful crash relapse suppressor for long COVID sufferers, it has a plethora of beneficial effects. So before we finish this point, the impacted stool can be pretty serious. And you can look for a clinic near you, something that offers things like a hydrocolonic. And that is a professional that helps you perform a enema in a professional setting. And a lot of people are more comfortable with that. And now we're going to move on to sort of segue into ivermectin. Something that people love and a lot of people hate and shiver when they hear that word. If you're still scared about ivermectin, please go to the COVID-19 Critical Care website. I have a link here, covid19criticalcare.com, and read up more about it. On top of its safety profile and its powerful anti-parasitic functions, ivermectin actually hosts a bunch of other benefits. It stabilizes blood sugar, similar to metformin/berberine, through the FX ligand mechanism. It's an autophagy inducer. That's amazing. We like that. It has anti-inflammatory and immunomodulatory effects. Think curing or covering histamine flares, so those allergic reactions, shortness of breath, MCAS, etc. And it also works as a GABA agonist. We love GABA, especially with autoimmune diseases, meaning that it stimulates the production of the GABA neurotransmitter, which is associated with the parasympathetic nervous system, the calming down one. The vagus nerve is directly associated with GABA and being able to lower the excitatory pathways like the NMDA and the acetylcholine pathways and the glutamine pathways, and increase the calming GABA ones. So it is beneficial for that a lot. The beauty of it all, ivermectin is extremely safe. Check out study after study. Even overdosing, which takes quite a bit, has a mild side effect that usually resolves. There was a study showing that they nearly drowned a lion in ivermectin, causing it to go temporarily blind. And that was one of the worst side effects they could find. And yet the symptoms reversed over time as the drug left the lion's body. Every animal in the world takes ivermectin as the safest antiparasitic and in very high doses, especially in treating anything on the skin. You just want to get the doses right. In Africa, for example, ivermectin is popped regularly on a monthly basis. None of this means that it's completely safe, similar to any other drug, but you don't worry about taking things like Valium, even though it's much more dangerous at infinitely smaller doses. The problem lies with the drug being politicized and then by some thinking that it cures COVID. From my experience, it treats symptoms of COVID, but it does not heal it. And that's where you get both sides fighting over it. Having said all of that, with a weakened immune system from your health disease, your long COVID, your autoimmune issue, you may want to have an antiparasitic at hand to at least rule out pathogenic hosts taking residence in your body when it's weak. So many people in the dry fasting community and other fasting communities talk about parasites and they freak out about them, and with good cause and good reason, but they get lost in the weeds of hundreds of different herbal antiparasitics that are just weak. In this case, I think ivermectin is a fantastic tool to put a lot of worry to rest. Ivermectin has been a tool that has saved me in my early long haul journey on some of the worst days, and it has otherwise been a peace of mind on the parasitic potential. If you need help sourcing it, please reach out to me and I will try to help and send you some information. Finally, it has been a roller coaster of a journey when it came to COVID and long COVID. If I had not had water fasting in my arsenal early on, I would not have been able to beat back the worst of the symptoms, most likely lost my job, and never had the power or financial means to start dry fasting and eventually the dry fasting club. If you're reading this, I hope you're aware of how important fasting is. It's probably the most common factor mentioned in most recoveries, alongside time and rest. You'll notice most people never fully recover, and this is because they don't have the full solution. Water fasting is a partial solution. Even dry fasting is a partial solution in itself. The refeed together with dry fasting is the complete solution. Now, I have to follow this up by quickly explaining that this doesn't mean that dry fasting will cure your long COVID, but it is the autophagy step. The refeeding is the recovery step, and hopefully you'll be able to recover correctly. It may take longer, and this is another point that I should have probably put into this article, but Don't expect to heal everything in 1 or 2 dry fasts. Even Filanov talks about a triple step dry fast where he talks about a 5 day move on to a 7 and to a 9 where you kind of compound it with shorter refeeds. And even before that, he recommends a ton of small dry fasts to build your dry fasting muscle and build your way up to it. It is a journey and you have a lot of work, but there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And I just want to finish off on saying that the Scorch protocol is what you need. If you are in this situation, use it as your guide. Everything is there for you. If any of this has helped you in any way, subscribe on the members page to help me continue this work. And that's it for this article. Thank you, and until next time. And that's it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it and got some good information out of it. If you know anyone that this information could benefit, please share it. If you have any questions, you can leave them as comments under the website article at dryfastingclub.com. Don't forget to join the Discord group, and if you're interested in diving a little deeper, feel free to schedule a chat with me. I have many small hacks and experiments that have not made it into the articles yet, but may be suitable for your situation on a case-by-case basis. Thank you for listening. Until next time, good luck on your dry fasting journey.